Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the HGLRC MotoWhoop 90. It's a pusher CineWhoop. HD camera is not included. The all-in-one flight board down here is the HGLRC Zeus 13 amp all-in-one, which is 3 to 6S compatible, but this quad runs 4S. Down even farther in there is the VTX, which is the Zeus Nano VTX, of course, that runs up to 350 milliwatt. The motors are the Aeolus 1303.5 4500 kV motors. Props are the 4-bladed Emax Vaughn 2-inch propeller. It does come with an extra set of propellers. Comes with a right angle adapter for USB access, an extra battery strap, some extra M2 screws that are 7 millimeters long, and it looks like about 10 of these tiny little screws that you use to secure the bottom plate to the ducts. You get a manual on the receiver that you choose. You also get a wire map for the board and all of its components. It also comes in a DJI with a Caddx Nebula Pro version. You get a iFly Safe card, prop direction card, a quality certificate. Almost forgot, you get a screwdriver and 2 spare ducts. And last but not least, stickers. The analog version weighs 92 and a little over 3/4 grams. I flew it on all 3 different sizes of this 4S battery, and I found the flight time didn't change all that much. With the battery I spent most of my flight time with, the 4S 450 milliamp, it weighs 144 and 3/4 grams. With the 520, you might get about 10 seconds more, maybe, and it weighs just about 149 grams. And with the 650, I didn't see much of a measurable time difference in the flight, and it weighs 153.5 grams. Most of my flight time was spent with the GoPro Hero 6 in a Beta FPV case that is naked, and with the 450 milliamp 4S battery, it weighs just over 170.25 grams. Motor post to motor post, I am getting 90 millimeters. As you can see there, it's a relatively calm day, but if you look through that gap in the trees, that back tree, you can see moving around a little bit. There is a breeze. 6 to 8 miles an hour is what the weather dictates, but I would say that puff of a gust of a wind, because our winds aren't steady. There'll be times where it's down in the 1 to 2 mile an hour, and then times where it's probably pushing somewhere around 10 mile an hour on the wind speed. And again, this isn't our footage that we see in the goggles. This is what's recorded on the HD camera. You know, these CineWhoop sort of things are meant for the slow cruising, you get your shot sort of flight. I will be playing the analog flight of this flight right afterwards. I think that will show you a more true version of how the quad flies in this sort of flight style. Because of course I've got FPV stabilization turned on for this Hero 6, so it takes some of the bobbles and wobbles, which this one doesn't have terribly, out of the flight, so you really don't see that. The flight's going to be about 2.5 minutes long, and as I said in the quick specs, I really didn't find much of a flight time difference change when I changed batteries. Maybe it's just my batteries, but I didn't spend a lot of time flying those other batteries because, quite honestly, with the extra weight, I didn't care for it. You know, we got a 2-inch prop. When you add too much weight, the flight characteristics can tend to get, it feels heavy, if that's a accurate way of describing it. So I would recommend you go with the recommended battery, the 4S 450 milliamp. But if you're wanting this quad and you only have, say, 520s or 650s, you can fly it. It does fly heavy or differently. I think it flies better with less weight. But, you know, everything costs money, so if you don't have those batteries, you have to decide, do I want that quad or do I want to buy more batteries? Kind of up to you there. On a couple of flights, I tried to do a slow orbit around the swing set here, and I find slow orbiting to be difficult. Orbiting itself isn't easy, but doing it slow, that's hard. Is that just me? Am I just some sort of weirdo or something? But man, I think I tried 6 different flights of orbiting that swing set when I'd kind of come around. Something new and fun to do as I'm slowly cruising around. But man, that's difficult for me. And I'm just wondering, is it difficult for you too? You can see I've got my jacket on. It was a cold day. So I think it was about 44 degrees about this point in time. This is about noon, probably closer to 12:15 or 12:30. So I've got my bigger, heavier coat. Usually I tend to wear my old man jacket, but that is going to bring us into the end of the flight, which we will end, and then we'll go into that analog flight, which does show the more true aspect of how the quad flies. As we're sitting here on the table, you can see that this is a slightly different day, and you can see that we've got some movement with the trees and the branches. So this is a more typical day for me, more wind, In this particular case, it was over 10 miles an hour. So this will give you a secondary opportunity to see how wind impacts this particular quad. And you'll also be able to tell that sometimes I speed up and slow down because of the direction of the wind. That's just natural. You know, the flat surfaces of the prop protection, they act as almost like a sail in that the wind can really push and grab or pull, what have you, and it does have an impact on the flight. This also gives you an idea of looking at the camera, which is the Runcam Nano 2 on here. I go around the front of the house, and I only do this when I have a VTX that's running or has the capabilities of running above 200 milliwatts. I can't get around the front of the house on 200 milliwatts. So hopefully that gives you a measurement or idea of the 350 milliwatt VTX and how it works. You know, higher milliwatt generally means greater penetration as well as range. It varies upon your environment, you know, how much RF are you battling out there. You can see we've already gotten a low battery warning, and that's very common. You can adjust this in beta flight. I did not in this particular case. Many times I do. I tend to try to fly them and find that point where I need to activate the low battery warning voltage to where when I end the flight, it comes in at 3.5 volts per cell. I've been doing that a long time. I don't find that flying my batteries down to that level have a negative impact on their performance across various quads. I mark batteries that I go down very, very low. There was one flight with this quad where I discharged a battery below 3 volts per cell, so that battery got a special little marking. In this particular case, we're going to come in right around that 3.5 volts per cell marking, even though we're well below that at this point in time in the flight. I think most people would look at this as not just a CineWhoop, but a CineWhoop in a smaller package. Some people prefer to have in this smaller package, prefer to have an HD and FPV camera kind of all in one rather than carrying a separate camera. But when it comes to the HD footage, it's really hard to beat going with a GoPro or something of that nature. Here we go. We're going to land now. As we go back to the home screen, we should see that battery bounce back up. You can see it's climbing back up now. And we got to 3.5 volts and the warning went away. Okay, so back at the desk here, something to call out is the mount with the camera and the naked GoPro. This is all one assembly, all one piece. So if you wanted to run different camera angles, you can do that. You just have to change the camera angle with this camera. And if you want to go lower than this, you see how the camera hits the ducts. So getting it down there, I tried to push it as far forward as I can. And then you have this screw right back here you tighten. So I held it forward, and you can see it's picking up the back end here. I held it forward, pressed down on that, and screwed that screw in. So this is the minimum angle I was able to get. But I wanted to make sure I draw your attention to all the printed parts being kind of one piece, except for the fact that the mount to the quad is different than the camera mounts. Those are separate. It does come with the pigtail that you need for a naked GoPro already soldered onto it, which is a good thing. We've got their little hammer, circular polarized antenna back here. This, I think, is if you ordered the Crossfire version, you would have another print for your antennas down here. So that I have the FR Sky version, so I have my antennas up here. We've got a battery mat that is rubberized, so it is a bit sticky. Binding it, because I have the XM Plus edition, it was lined up with the hole, or I could manipulate it to line up with the hole where I could press it, but because there isn't anything really behind it, it kind of moves. So in order to bind, to press the bind button on it, I ended up removing all the screws and then just holding it in my hand. You know, you press the button, you apply power, and then it gives red and green. You're set to bind, and then put it all back together. Not a big deal, but something we need to call out. It's interesting that they used 1303.5 motors on a 4S. That's, I think, a new combination to me. VTX and using it with a button, I just don't see how you're going to do that because it's down in there. This way you can also see that green part down in there. That is a capacitor. I have no idea what its capabilities are. Hopefully you can see the size of it right there, that green part between the ducts. So that should help to clean up our voltage a little bit. There was some noise. If you didn't see it, and I forgot to mention it, when we take off, there seems to be a lot of ESC noise that gets into the video, but then after you get off the ground, like maybe 2 seconds later, that decreases. So something to make note of. Go back and watch it if that's something that you want to. I forgot to call it out in the moment. Soft mounting here on our flight controller, that's always a good thing. Helps reduce micro vibrations. I know it includes a right angle adapter, and I ended up taking the right angle adapter up through this way to get my USB connected. As you can see here, the arm is kind of in the way. The USB port is right here if you can't see it. So I couldn't get the USB port in this way. At least I didn't feel I could without, risking possible USB port breakage. So I went up through the duct, and that is very likely how they designed it, but I was just trying both ways for my own purposes. You can see these ducts, they were previously used on another HGLRC product of the same size that, in my particular case, it was the DJI version. So it was right side up, and these were the same ducts. And we see this from just about all the manufacturers, that if they have what I would call a right side up version, then they have an inverted version as well. I think there's very little extra manufacturing they have to do to create a secondary type of quad. The theory behind the pusher sort of configuration is that it should be more efficient and more stable. I'm not going to get into that. I think that's a topic that gets a lot of debate. That's something that you have to kind of make your mind up. Quite honestly, for me, I don't do a lot of pushers, especially with my smaller whoops in the house. I tend to run a more traditional, just, regular style. I do see a fair number of people, at least at some portion, doing an inverted with these little whoops like this. So if there's an actual benefit to that or not, again, I'm not going to get into that. That's something you guys can discuss down in the comments section. As far as our screws go, we got all hex screws except for that bottom plate, which we kind of already called out, and they give you extra screws in case you happen to lose them. I have, back to the ducts, I have broken these on the other quad that I had that was Vista based. So it came in about the same weight, maybe a touch heavier, and I flew it inside. And after a couple of crashes, there was one where I came down the stairs, and then I didn't get turned and throttled up hard enough before I smacked into the wall. So I did break them. I did break it in the area of where there was a screw mount. So it's good they give you a couple extras. I just can't see them lasting a long time, specifically if you do fly it inside and do tend to crash quite a bit. But of course, this isn't the type of quad that I would recommend for someone who's planning on crashing and planning on flying more aggressively. I did try flying it more aggressively, of course, without my naked GoPro. It just doesn't have those sort of capabilities. I know I've done it on others. I chose not to show it here just because I didn't think it was fun. That's the main point of me flying and making videos, is to have fun. In this particular case, it wasn't fun. I didn't have a dramatic crash or anything. It just, trying to fly it more aggressively isn't what it's designed for, and it wasn't very fun. As far as the battery goes, I ran my battery vertical for the most part. I did try flat to see if it made any difference. There could be a difference. It just wasn't discernible for me. I do wish they had another mount included for this, for, say, an Insta360 Go, probably the Go 2. That depends upon the market uptake on that Go 2. That would have been a nice feature for some people to have. Of course, you could probably find or design your own print to hold an alternate camera. I also found that the SMO 4K did not fit in this, at least very well. I was trying to force it in, and it got a little bit difficult, and I didn't want to damage either one of them, so I just got my Hero 6 back in the Beta FPV case and ran it that way. So if you have an SMO 4K, it may fit, but it's going to be very difficult to get it in there. It's going to be very tight, and I don't know how clean the fit will be. Something else to consider. And the last thing would be the price. This particular quad, as I said earlier in the video, comes in at two different versions. It comes in a Caddx Vista version as well as an analog version. The analog is what we saw here, and the price is $179 according to Banggood. Of course, you can buy it directly from HGLRC, and the Caddx Vista version, which also you have some receiver options, so the price is going to vary. That HD or Vista version is going to run you about $300. So not surprising, it's pretty typical anytime you put Vista in something that the price goes up around $130 to $160, depending upon what you're looking at. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I do appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.